Did you get additional malpractice insurance for your locums physicians, or did the hospital add them to their respective policies? As a locums company, you can provide medical malpractice.
Make sure that medical malpractice is like legit.
Geico doesn't offer medical malpractice, y'all.
Right. You can't give them Geico.
The general, they don't offer medical malpractice, right?
You mean Shaq don't offer
Nah.
Can we rock? What's up, Doc? Can we rock?
Hey, we talk about locum tenens a lot on this show. Renee and I, we've been doing it for well over 10 years now. So if you're curious about locum tenens and how it might fit into your career, check out locumstory.com. That's locumstory.com, and you'll see all the different reasons why physicians choose locums and how it works for them. Find out about jobs, taxes, travel, and to me, most importantly, pay. Visit locumstory.com to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Set for Life Insurance. Listen, docs, one of the first steps we took to pay off our student loan debt was realizing we paid way too much for our disability insurance. That all changed when we found Set for Life Insurance. They helped us with a customized insurance policy that met our needs and, most of all, budget. To learn more, check out setforlifeinsurance.com.
Yo, what's good, everyone? This is Dr. Nee. I'm joined by
Dr. Renee. Yeah. Freakly. Yeah.
Content Over Everything, I see. COE.
Now, this is just me on an everyday basis.
Okay. Well, listen, everyone. This is another episode of Docs Outside the Box. Once again, I want to give a shout out to those who are watching us on YouTube and those listening to us on the podcast, yo. Mad shout outs to y'all. But one thing, though, before we move on real quick, one thing. Listen, iOS 17, there's like this new update for all you Apple people. The new update doesn't allow automatic downloads for podcast episodes. And you got to go back into the podcast app, Apple Podcasts, and make sure you're resubscribed to us. Make sure you're telling it that you want automatic downloads, because I'm looking at our download numbers and I'm like, yo, what's going on? I was kind of taking it personal. I was like, yo, y'all don't want to listen to us anymore? And then I find out anymore. Then I find out that it's actually,
they really don't like us.
Then I find out that it's not just us. It's in general, all of the podcasts out there. Then when this new update went out there, Apple tried to they try to get us, yo. They try to they took out the ability to do automatic downloads or automatic follows. So everybody's download numbers are down. So I'm just reminding you all, if you're on Apple Podcasts, just make sure you recheck, follow, or subscribe so that we can get our numbers back up, because we appreciate y'all. All right. So listen. Oh, one more last thing too, before we jump into this episode. So I'm at I'm at one of my locum spots, and I come in, I haven't been there in 2 weeks. And all of a sudden everybody's like, yo, the podcast superstar, and they're just joking around. But apparently some orthopedic trauma fellow, some guy who is actually doing an orthopedic trauma fellowship, he's looking for a job, comes to this hospital that I work at. And I guess he tells them that he's heard my podcast and is either wanting to do locums or that we're talking about locums, and basically kind of outing us to everybody and shit. I'm like, damn, bro, keep your mouth.
How is he outing us if we are podcasting?
Well, But anyway, listen, if you are that orthopedic surgeon, yo, reach out to us, yo. Let me know what's going on. Hit me up on Instagram at Docs Outside the Box, or just hit us at team@drnedarko.com. I want to know what you think. Are you coming? What do you think? I'm going to give you the real scoop. All right. But yeah,
we'll tell you what's going on over there.
I'll give you the scoop, man. I'll give you the scoop. But look, let's jump into this. Since we're talking about locums, let's wrap this up, because for the last several weeks we've been answering various points of the questions that were put out by these two ER doctors who, in essence, are tired of being employed and want to kind of go and do things on their own, and they want to work locums. They want to be independent contractors. They don't want to be held down by the man, so to speak. And not only do they want to be independent contractors where nobody tells them when to work, how to work, they just make as much as they want to make and so forth. They actually want to start their own locums agency, which means they want to kind of have other doctors employed, have other doctors contracted through them.
Right. There we go.
And then they go and send them off to various hospitals. And then they're in charge of travel. They're in charge of hotel, all those different things. They want to do that. And they want to know how we do that. So we did that. Let's tell them how we did it so that we can break this down for them and they will understand this forever. And it will be broken down so it will forever be broke. That's it. All right.
Okay. All right, y'all. That's great. But before we get started with that, let's actually have you guys look in the show notes because we're going to be giving you a download on kind of our own steps of how we started our locum tenens agency. So that way you don't have to keep scrolling through the audio or the video. If you don't have it right in front of you, you could just pull it up in a PDF file. So don't forget to look in the show notes.
This is important, yo. You guys check out these resources, guys. These resources are there. We put a lot of work in there. I'm telling you, it kind of gives you a 30,000 foot view as to, what to look for in so many different aspects of whether you want to travel, whether you want to start your own, be a locums on your own. These are really, things that you can kind of keep in mind when you're looking to transition into locums. And I think a lot of times people feel like, it's all over the place. Do I look at this resource? Do I look at that resource? I got 19 different resources. You know how I like to plan or I like to research. I'll have like a whole map full of a whole bunch of different things. Look at this. How does this do this?
I'm like, what is happening?
That is amazing. Yo, y'all see this on YouTube?
What is happening to your background?
How do we do that? Is this like...
I don't know.
I don't know why it keeps doing that. Remember when we were meeting with Kiara, it was doing that?
Yeah. I think it's in your settings, in your video settings.
It might be.
Well, whatever you said, it looked really great. And very important.
Let me see. I'm trying to see if it does this. I don't know.
Anyway, I don't know what happened.
Make sure you guys check out the show notes and check out our resources. We got a lot of great resources there. But listen, people want to know how we started an agency. They want to know how we fucked around and started charging over 7 figures. Remember that one year?
Yeah.
Fucked around and charged 7 figures. And I was like, yo, I had never
literally
seen...
$1 million business.
I want people to understand this. Like, people would say like, I had $1 million? I was like, no, we charged.
Charged $1 million.
We charged 7 million. We charged 7 figures.
Revenue. Gross.
Yo, you start to think, this is how much they be paying? But listen, let's talk about how we got into starting an agency. We talked about locums and all that stuff. And since they contacted you first, why don't you take it? Let us know how we started an agency.
Go.
Oh, you.
Well, so it all started at a point at which I was actually leaving my job, my permanent job. So we were, just for quick backstory for the people who may not be too familiar or who haven't listened to the previous episodes, which you should. But I was actually leaving my permanent job. So me and I were both permanently employed at this one hospital. This was around the time we had done IVF for 2.5 years. It had failed. Nee was like, you need to leave your job.
I didn't say it like that. That's not how I said it. Nope. That's not how I said it. I said, listen,
what did you say?
Do you think maybe you should consider leaving your job? And I went like this.
Yeah, okay, I don't think so.
Because I didn't want you to throw anything at me. But I was very nice about it. And I just suggested that maybe you should take some time off and just focus on just getting knocked up.
Getting pregnant.
That's all I said.
Getting knocked up. Okay.
But don't make it like I told you. You need to take. Don't do that. Don't do that.
I need to get you canceled.
You're not gonna make me the villain in this story. Nope.
I need to get you canceled. But anyway, you suggested that I leave my job. After some thought, I was like, I think I'm gonna leave, my job, and that's a different story in terms of how I came to that decision for another day. But as I was leaving, actually, I think the day after I left, or 2 days after I left, I got an email that basically said, hey, would you consider, potentially putting these private docs that work at the hospital through your locum tenens agency, because the private docs who actually were in a practice, but not all of them in the practice wanted to do independent contracting. So they decided that they were each independently going to contract with the hospital, and the hospital was like, no, we don't do that. If you're going to contract with us, you need to do it as an entity, not as an individual. In other words, not a sole proprietor. And so they didn't want to form yet another practice, if you will. And they didn't want to use their current practice since all of them were not going to be contracting. So I went to Nee and I was like, what do you think? And what did you say?
I had a lot of questions. I was very skeptical.
You did.
I was
very skeptical.
I was a big skeptic because ultimately the last thing that you said to me was, hey guys, what they said to us was, hey guys, listen, all you have to do is contract these doctors through your company. We already had a formed company. We, as the hospital, will pay you as your company. And then you use that money to pay the doctors. And to
Which,
them,
by the
that was
way,
an easy.
That's the normal way of locums.
Right. But that makes sense. But basically they were like, let's say you wanted to, I'm going to simplify this very easy. If it costs $10 to pay for a doctor, the hospital wanted to give us $10 and then have us pay the doctors $10. And we were like, hell no. Because yeah, it sounds easy, right? Like, yeah, you just take that money and then you give it to the doctor. But one thing that people don't understand, and we're going to talk about this later on, is you got to create payroll. That costs money. You got to create schedules. That costs money. You got to pay taxes on some of those things. That costs money. You got to get a CPA. That costs money. So we had fees. So it's not as simple as just, yeah, you give us $10 and then we give it to the doctor and then it's a clean exchange. It doesn't work like that. Actually, we would be going into the negative to have this relationship. Right. So that was my big question. I was like, okay, well, great. Yeah, you want us to do this and facilitate this for y'all, but it's going to cost y'all.
Yeah.
And that was the big holdup.
Yeah, that was the big question, right? Because they kept using the word, well, it's just going to be a pass through. It's just going to be a pass through. And it's like, hold on a second. One of the things that you didn't mention, in terms of all of the things that we would need to worry about and pay for is our time, right? Because our time was worth something as well. And so you can't discount the time that we were going to be taking to be able to provide this service that they otherwise would not have been able to provide for themselves. And so the other thing that you didn't mention is they wanted us to do the whole schedule. So that's one thing that you guys got to realize. So what I mean by that is usually what will happen is the hospital will go to the locums company and say, hey, here's our calendar. We need 2 weeks covered every month. Can you provide coverage for that? We don't care who you bring. Just make sure you can help us cover 2 weeks. What happened to us is they give us the entire schedule and they were like, yo, fill the schedule with either the docs that we already have or the docs that you have, make the magic happen. And we don't care how it ends up, but just make sure there's no holes. Those are two different things. Right. Correct. Well, yes, correct. So we ended up, because they technically only had one OBGYN on their own payroll, the rest of the schedule, the majority of the schedule was empty, was completely empty. So we were at times filling over 20 days in a week, in a month of different doctors who needed to be on this schedule. And so that's essentially what we ended up doing.
All right, y'all. This is Dr. Nee. I've been doing locum tenens trauma surgery for well over 10 years, and I haven't looked back since. Best combination of lifestyle and income that I could ask for. Now for you, your needs, your wants, that's going to be different than mine. Maybe you want more control over when you work or even how much you work. Or, look, you're just trying to make more money to pay off those damn student loans. Now the other thing is, pay attention. The average locums doc gets paid at least 33% more than your average employed doc. Got your attention now? So look, I get it. Sometimes the hardest part is, where do I start? You start your research at locumstory.com. Once again, that's locumstory.com. It's an unbiased educational resource about locum tenens. There, you're going to find stories about the different reasons why doctors choose locums and how it works for them. Locumstory.com has tools that let you explore locums pay, demand for your specialty, and even compare different locum tenens agencies. So look, stop sitting on the fence or just thinking about it. Start doing. Do your own research at locumstory.com. Once again, that's locumstory.com. It's easy.
So let's talk about like a little bit of the process of contracting with them.
Well, how about this?
Talk a little bit about that.
Actually, let's do it over a set of questions, right?
Okay.
Which is one, how did you decide to pay the doctors, right? And how we decided to pay the doctors plays a major role in how we did the contract. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the questions that they ask is, how do you decide to pay the providers? Well, in this situation, the way in which we decided to pay the providers was kind of something that was already predetermined before we even got to the point. Right. So hospital was talking to the doctors. The doctors were like, yeah, we don't want to be independent contractors. Or excuse me, we don't want to form our own. Well, they did want to be. We don't want to form another entity. We got to figure out something, but we kind of know how much we want to get paid, right? And we came in and we were like, okay, like we understand how much you guys want to get paid, but we want to get paid too also, since we're going to be doing the schedule for you guys. We're going to be giving you I'm talking about to the doctors 1099s, and then to the hospital, we're going to be giving you guys a schedule. We got to get something. So that was the first thing is, one, in this situation, we kind of walked into a situation that was already kind of done for us already.
Yeah, which is not really the norm, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you're starting your own locums, if you're starting your own locum tenens agency and you go to contract with a facility, typically you are putting forth what your rates will be to the hospital. And then you also put a rate forth to the doctor.
Yeah. So we just said, hey, this is how much you're going to pay the doctor. We're going to add on an additional fee and make it a total global fee, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's $10, we actually want to get paid $15, right? And then from that $15,
these are not real numbers, folks.
We'll keep $5 for ourselves, and then the $10 will go to each individual doctor each day. So that was one of the first things that we had to get over, or we had to go through. It was like, okay, now that we know how much the doctors are going to get paid, and now that we have an agreed upon amount of what the total amount is going to be, we kind of know what our profit is going to be. Does this work for us? And we said, yeah. So that was one of the first big hurdles. Is this going to financially make sense for us to do an agency like this? And we decided it would.
Yeah. And the other thing that I would say about that is, again, our case, right? Our case study, if you will, is a little bit different than if you were going to be doing this from scratch. But oftentimes from scratch, like I mentioned, you offer a rate to the hospital, then you offer another rate to the physician. Usually what you're getting paid is going to be some percentage of what the physician is going to be making, and that is taken out from what the hospital essentially is paying you. So just kind of keep that in mind. For your agencies that are out there, right? Like the big agencies that are out there, we found out at one point, right? When I was out in Idaho, we found out how much I was getting paid, and we found out how much the agency was actually getting paid, because one of the administrators unknowingly spilled the beans to me. And it turns out that I think that hospital was getting paid, that agency was getting paid 40%.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, that's crazy.
To my pay, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, so basically, you found out because of that old timely mistake in the office, which is you send emails and you add people on to the emails who shouldn't be CC'd on, and they can see the email chain. And basically, you saw the email chain of how much the hospital was keeping. Sorry, how much their locums company was keeping, and then how much they were paying you. And it was basically what you kept 50% of the money.
It was I think it was 40% to the hospital. Actually, you might be right. It might have been about 50%. I gotta pull up that email one of these days. I actually have that email. I need to pull it up one of these days. But yeah,
but if you think about it, that's crazy. To me, that's crazy. I'll tell you why that's crazy. Like if it's like a 50-40 split, or in some places I've seen 50-50 split. I've seen 60-40 split with the locums making 60% and the doctors making 40%. And the reason I think that that's crazy, I'll tell you why. The reason I think that's crazy is when you first start working with a locums company, yeah, there's some work that they do in terms of helping you get your credentials, your licenses, particularly in states that you don't have that stuff. You know, helping you get onto hospital staff. That takes some work, right? They have these big companies and overhead. But after that initial point, when like you're going into month 2, month 5, month 7, and you're working at this one hospital or multiple hospitals, and there's no more credentialing that needs to be done, it's smooth sailing, right? It's smooth sailing, right? It's like, how much more work do you need? And do you necessarily need to be getting 50%, 60% of the money that I need when I wake up in the morning and go see these patients, right? Why are you taking 60% of that?
The liability.
Each time, think about that, guys. Each hour that you work, they're getting 60% of the cut or 50% of the cut or 40. That's a large amount, right? So for us, we decided that since we wanted to be physicians first, since we are a physician run company, we wanted to make sure that we wanted to maximize the most amount of money to the providers, whoever it may be. Right. So we use technology. We just said, look, like we're in this to make a profit, but also at the same time, we got to realize the sweat equity belongs to the person who's actually on call that time. And that's how we decided how much we would keep. Right. We kept like 10%, if that, 10 to 15% of that was what we kept to keep the doors open, to keep the lights on, and for us to have a little bit of profit and make it worth our while. So one of the questions they asked is, how do you determine how you're going to pay the doctors? That's up to you. But also realize that you can use technology to kind of decrease your overhead costs. And realize that one of the ways that you can market yourself over all the other agencies is that, hey, you as doctors, you keep more money. We take a little bit less, So that's one of the questions they have. But one of the other questions that I wanted to shift to real quick, just to kind of keep this moving, is she asked, or they asked, in starting your locums company, did you utilize certain lawyers to draft contracts or other agencies that streamlined the process, right? And the reason I want to bring this up is because this is part of us, how we did our contracts, right? Yeah. So my answer is hell yes. We use the contract. We use multiple contracts, right? So there's one contract that's between our company and the hospital. And then there's another contract between our company and the physicians. Right. Yep. You want to chime in on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, having a contract that is soundly written and that really details everything. Oh my God, people. There's going to be a point where we're going to have a story for you. Not today, but let me tell you something. Making sure that your contract is well written, making sure that the appropriate amount of liability is on you as the locums company, and the appropriate liability is on the physician, and the appropriate liability is on the hospital is extremely, extremely important. That's as far as I'll go in the story right now. But one of these days, we're going to tell you all the story.
Say it again, Renee. Say it again. The appropriate amount of what?
The appropriate amount of liability. Because remember, just because you are the locums company doesn't mean that the physicians are employed by you. They're not employed by you. And therefore, you don't dictate anything that they actually do in terms of their practice. So you just have to remember that, having a contract and having it looked at by a lawyer who understands the lingo. So don't go getting I'm going to get like a real estate lawyer.
Don't get a tax lawyer.
Right. Get a tax lawyer, real estate lawyer, music industry lawyer. That's not going to help you. You need somebody who really understands contract law, who understands HR, who understands medicine and how this stuff actually works.
Oh yeah. So real quick, without getting too much into the weeds, whatever your contract with the doctors or the providers are going to be, it's really clear. Like you got to make sure that you're making it clear that this is not an employer-employee relationship, right? Yep. Like we are independent contractors and I'm working with this agency and we're like a staffing company. That's it. Mm-hmm. That's really clear. The other thing too is that making sure that it's clear that the doctors that go to these hospitals, they're just contractors. They're not employers, or excuse me, they're not employees or anything like that. And that's very important, right? Because some doctors may want to know, hey, like, I just got to this hospital and I don't like it here. Like, I want to be out, right? Or I don't want to go to these meetings, you know, and there's certain things that you can get away with if you're an independent contractor, and there's things that you can't get away with if you're an employee. So it's very important to kind of delineate that. And I would say lean on the independent contractor side. And then the other thing is you got to let the expectations be known to your providers. And what I mean by that is, y'all, don't trip. Just, you know, it's not all not all the responsibility is on the hospital. Like, you got to make sure that your doctors are finishing their notes. They're submitting their notes in a timely fashion, because if they can't, then the hospital can't bill. And they're going to be upset when, like, you're charging them these locum rates, and then there's notes that are half done or notes that are not done, and they can't bill Medicare or Medicaid or whatever third-party insurance agency that is. And it's going to come on you guys as the company. So just make sure in the contract, you're making sure that you're holding the providers accountable to make sure that if you don't do notes,
right,
you don't get paid. Those are three big things, I think. So
yeah, I would say one more thing, you know, in terms of the employer-employee relationship. Just because it's written down that you are not the employer and the contracted physician is not your employee doesn't give you a pass to treat them like an employee off paper, right? So in other words,
explain. Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah,
what does that
in
mean?
other words, right? Like, you can't say, well, you have to go and work at this hospital. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to put forth an offering and say, hey, I have a hospital that has a need, and here is the need. Here are the days that are needed. Here's the rate that they're discussing. Would you like to do it? Are you interested? You cannot place a physician in an assignment. You cannot do that. So you can't treat them like an employee, but then say, well, it says on paper that you're not an employee. Because let me tell you something, paper trails will negate that contract immediately. And trust me, you don't want the Labor Bureau coming your way.
I think the same way that you guys would document in your notes, right? Like, you know how in medicine, everybody documents everything, right? If you don't document, it didn't happen. It's the same thing in business. Like, in this world, you got to be very clear as to how you treat people and make sure you are following the law. Because I'm telling you, they will come for you. So just make sure you're very clear as to what is covered, what is not covered, how they work, how they don't work, all of those different things. Make sure you're abreast on, independent contractor law.
Yeah.
You need to know employee. You need to know employee contracts also. So here's another thing that we had to clarify on our contract also. Here's a good question. Did you get additional malpractice insurance for your locums physicians, or did the hospital add them to their respective policies? So let me take it from here. I'm gonna be very honest with you guys. As a locums company, you can provide medical malpractice, right? So you purchase medical malpractice, and then the doctors who are contracted with you, they're covered under the company's medical malpractice. Then they get sent to the hospital. That's one way you could do it. Another way that you can do it is by, depending on your relationship with the hospital could be like, yeah, we know that they're independent contractors, but we'll provide coverage for them. That doesn't happen too much, but we'll provide coverage for them. The reason why the latter, I think, works the best is because the hospital has like these huge group policies, right? So having a doctor, an additional doctor added onto their group policy is not that big of a deal. Right. But if you have to get your own insurance, if the company has to get their own insurance, a lot of times that may increase the rate that the agency is charging the hospital. Right. So what was $10 a day is now maybe $12 a day, and that stuff adds up. And that's why a hospital may say, look, screw that, go back to $10 an hour, and we'll cover the medical malpractice of that.
These are not real numbers.
Right. There's a caveat. Like, hey, yo, Alfred, put it down here. Yo, disclaimer. These ain't real numbers.
These are not real numbers. Okay. No, but that's important to know. I mean, remember, you're also negotiating, so you can negotiate just about anything, right? I don't know if anybody has been following the series that we've been doing with John Apino, who is the contract reviewer for Contract Diagnostics, right? The founder of Contract Diagnostics. But we've had some episodes out about reviewing contracts and, negotiating. But in this case, right, if you have a hospital who says, hey, we want you to provide the malpractice insurance, that's absolutely what we want. We don't want to put the physicians on our own malpractice coverage. That's fine. The other thing that you can negotiate is, okay, you will reimburse us for that, malpractice insurance, right? So we can keep the rate the same as long as you reimburse me for that expense that I just made. If you don't want to reimburse me outright, then the rate has to go up, maybe by a certain percentage. So, these are things that you really should think about. Read on how to be able to kind of navigate all of these situations about employer, employee, malpractice insurance, all of that stuff, because that's going to be really vital to your success as an agency.
So in our contract, we had where the hospital would pay for the medical malpractice for these docs. So that was actually in the contract. And then in our contract to the doctors, we told them that they would have medical malpractice. It might be offered by us or it might be offered by the hospital, depending, right? So that's a big deal, right? And you also got to make sure, go ahead, Ben.
No, the other thing that I was going to say is, make sure that medical malpractice, which is probably what you were about to say, make sure that medical malpractice is like legit, for your physicians, right? Because you want to make sure that
Geico doesn't offer medical malpractice, y'all.
Right. You can't give them Geico.
The general, he don't offer medical. They don't offer medical malpractice.
You mean Shaq don't offer?
Nah.
Can we rock? What's up, Doc? Can we rock?
So you want to make sure that it meets, right, the criteria of the what is it, like the 1 million and the 3 million, whatever it is, right? You want to make sure
it's state. You just make sure it's
state, right? It is state dependent,
state specific. Yeah, that's it.
Right. So it's very state specific. You're absolutely right. Right. So you want to make sure that, you go to a broker who's going to be able to give you really good malpractice insurance. But I would argue, and maybe everybody's not going to agree with me, and that's okay. But because we are very physician oriented, I would argue that make sure that you get either occurrence insurance or, claims made with tail, with tail.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that you should actually, outline in your contract with the hospital. Like you need to be like, listen, this is the coverage.
I'll put it out there. Anybody right now who is practicing either as an employee or as a private practice doctor or whatever you're doing as an independent contractor, if you got claims made and you don't have tail coverage, what are you doing? Why are you still doing that? That should not be an option whatsoever. I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're in Florida. I don't care if you're in California. But basically
explain to everybody what that is, just in case, because I know we talked about it with the John Apino episode, but people may not have heard that one.
Yeah, so there's two types of medical malpractices for the most part. There's occurrence-based and then there's claims made or claims-based. And what that means is, let's say you practice at a hospital for 5 years. Both types of coverages are going to cover you for what happened over those 5 years, right? The key thing is what happens when you leave that facility and you're no longer working there anymore. Occurrence-based basically says, listen, whether you leave there and you're in year 6 or you're in year 40, we got you. If someone comes up with a medical malpractice case at year 59, we got you. You good.
Yeah.
We got you. That's more expensive, right? Mm-hmm. That's that Cadillac plan, that Cadillac Geico insurance over there, right? It's very expensive, but you ain't got to worry about, if someone tries to call, hem you up in 50 years, you always got covered.
Talking about, my kid didn't go to Harvard. Dr. Darko delivered my kid and he didn't go to Harvard. That's not my fault.
We talking about you. They talking about you. Okay, yeah.
OB.
That Dr. Darko. Yeah. Now there's claims made. Claims made basically is during those 5 years you're covered, but if you leave, you have to purchase something that's called tail coverage, which is, yeah, you leave and in, let's say in year
You asked
10,
out. That's what it is.
let's say in year 10, someone says, yo, the delivery didn't go
My
right.
kid ain't go to Harvard.
My kid ain't go to Harvard and I want to sue. Well, if you just have regular claims made insurance and no tail coverage, well, if they come to you at year 10, you don't have coverage anymore. They just covered what happened, during those 5 years. After that, that's it. But tail coverage will say, yeah, in year 59, we got you, right? So what you end up seeing is claims made oftentimes is a lot cheaper than occurrence based because, it's cheaper. And you oftentimes have to purchase the tail coverage, right? To cover you separately. And what a lot of private practice doctors or doctors who work in like these group practices that make you purchase tail, what they end up finding out is in order to cover you for all that back stuff that happened before in year 1 through 5, you're going to have to fork over almost like 100% of what the premiums are going to be or even more. So sometimes you have to fork over like $100K to get you to cover all your stuff. And it's like, who's floating around with $100K,
Right.
and
that's
free
not
money
payments.
to put that out?
That's $100,000, like one-time payment.
Yeah. So listen, guys, without getting too,
maybe didn't let you pay it over 6 months.
Without getting into too much
know.
debt, those are some of the things that we hashed out in the contract. And we went to a lawyer. We got a lawyer that we trust to help us do everything. So they reviewed our agreement with the physicians. They looked at our agreement with the hospital, and it was 100 proof. It was cash money. Nothing is bulletproof, right? So we covered everything. There were times when I was just like, why do we have this in here? Why are we going so far in debt? And it's like, yo, you never know, y'all. You never know. Like even things like related to possibly COVID, right? Like you got to cover things like those are things that we call force majeure, right? Where like natural events occur and maybe you can't get coverage because maybe all the airlines went bankrupt. Well, are you still responsible if you're a company in New Jersey and you got to get people over to California? How you going to cover that, right? But like you have to be able to cover a lot of these different things. But if you get a really good lawyer who's worth his or her salt, they got you. And I think it's worth it. It's going to cost you. But if you're really willing to get into this, you're going to have to pay for that. That's what I think.
Yeah. So. And be willing to walk away if the terms aren't what they should be. Like you got to be willing to walk away. But. So
that's a good point. So we got the contract now covered and now it's like, so now it's like, we got to provide coverage. So the question is, did we hire anyone to recruit full-time doctors? Right. And I think you got to look at this in two phases. So initially we came in with a crew already, right? The hospital had their crew of people who they wanted us to contract with. So we had our crew, and then the hospital had one person who combined could basically fill an entire schedule, right? And so now our job is okay, how do you properly get these doctors to sign up for a contract or for a schedule? How do you get them on the schedule, right? How do you talk to 5 different people to get them on a schedule? That's hard. Right? How do you make it automated, right? Because now you got to scale it, right? How do you make this occur so that when I'm sleeping, someone can still sign up? I don't know how to do that. I can't talk to each person each way, right? Then how do you make sure that you are confirming with these doctors that, now that you signed up, like this is what you're going to do, right? How do you make sure that they don't cancel in 30 days, right? These are all these different things that you got to think about. Who's going to provide that letter? So that was the next step. You want to get into that? So I think that's the big thing is how do you create a schedule?
Right. So I realized very quickly that if we don't automate, we were going to be in trouble. If we didn't automate this, because we started out with a crew of, I want to say it was at least 4 doctors, at least, trying to cover potentially 20 plus days, every single month, which means we would have to confirm every single day that they were going to be working. I'd have to look at the holes in the schedule. And I was like, there's no way like I'm going to be able to just do this. So we ended up using a resource that helped us to put the schedule in to say the dates that were needed for the physician. So there was some back work, that needed to be done, but it was so kind of like what do you call that? It was so repetitive, right? The work was so repetitive that it wasn't like, oh my God, like I got to cater to every single person. So we used something called You Can Book Me.
Yeah.
And we put in the dates for every single month that we needed, and then put it out to the physicians and said, okay, the You Can Book Me for the month of December is out. Go ahead and start picking your dates. And then
First come, first serve.
First come, first serve. And so we put that out there. The physicians would choose their dates. And once they would choose their dates, then I would be able to go back and see, okay, what are the holes that are in the schedule that aren't covered. For the most part, if something was really easy to cover or whatever, even though I was pregnant at the time and I should have probably been sitting my butt down. But if I wasn't traveling and I was available, I would actually just take the call, right? And just be like, there's a couple of hours here that isn't covered, or there's one night that isn't covered. So I would just end up taking the call. Which was really nice, right? Because when you have your own locum tenens agency, especially if it's within your specialty, then you can do that. And so these were OB docs. So definitely I could take the call.
I think one thing that's clear, one thing that's really, if y'all really are serious about this, you got to be able to make sure you create a system in your contract that says that they can't cancel within 30 days. Excuse me, not that they can't cancel, but there's got to be some type of way to prevent them, right, from your providers, the doctors, from canceling within 30 days. Because if you're working with a hospital and the doctors are consistently, canceling, or there's no barrier to stop them from canceling, they're going to cancel. And that's not going to work for you from an agency standpoint. So you got to make sure that you have something that's in line that says,
some
you
sort
cancel
of
in 30
hurdle.
days. Yeah, you got to make it hurt a little bit if they cancel in 30 days.
Yeah. I forget what our hurdle was. I think it was a penalty. It was a monetary penalty for the next time they would sign up with us. Nobody ever canceled, actually. So that, thankfully, we didn't have to do that. Our doctors were pretty consistent. But yeah, you want to create some sort of hurdle, preferably a monetary hurdle for yourself, because what's going to happen is if they cancel, then that increases the work on your end to have to do, whatever you need to do to find a person to cover that assignment. So, definitely create some sort of hurdle to do that.
This episode is brought to you by Set for Life Insurance. Listen, docs, one of the first steps we took to pay off our student loan debt was realizing we paid way too much for our disability insurance. That all changed when we found Set for Life Insurance. They helped us with a customized insurance policy that met our needs and, most of all, budget. To learn more, check out setforlifeinsurance.com.
So what are some of the overhead fees that they should be aware of, right? So I think definitely, you got to worry about software, right? Because software is going to be the key to automating this. So for us, like you can book me was like over the year, I think it was like $200 or even less than that.
Yeah, it was cheap back then. I mean, I don't know how much it is now. But yeah, this is 5-6 years ago.
So basically you can book me. It's a scheduler. They go on, they click. When they click their dates, they get a letter saying that, hey, you confirmed yourself. And when somebody else goes and look at the calendar, or you can book me, that date is shaded out. They can't choose it anymore, right? So that's going to cost some money. Then you're probably going to need some money to pay for payroll. Payroll costs money, right? So what payroll is, whenever the hospital pays you guys as a lump sum, right? Then you pay the doctors. You need a way to either automate that, or you need a way to pay them in a way so that at the end of the year, the doctors can get a 1099, right? So you got to be very, you have to figure out a system so as to pay them and keep track of how much you're paying them so that by the end of the year, they get their 1099s and they're happy, right? So that costs some money, right? Then you're going to have to get a CPA, I think. Look, you're going to have to this is the big boys, big girls. You're going to have to get a CPA. That's going to cost you some money, right? Yeah. And then I think in general, you might end up needing a VA in some form or fashion to do something that may be either getting them some confirmation letters to your provider saying, hey, you chose this date. And now that you chose this date, you're going to stick to it. And here are some of the rules. If you cancel outside of 30 days, this is what happens. If you cancel within 30 days, this is what happens. And great, this is who you contact if there's an emergency, this blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And we sent this out to every doctor every month, all the time. We have copies of everything all the time. So some of this, the money that you'll spend will be on like automating software, as well as some things that you just really can't do without, which is like a CPA or even like payroll costs.
Yeah. The attorney as well is going to be,
the attorney.
Overhead costs. You might have, depending on what you use for invoicing, that might, invoicing and bookkeeping, that might end up costing you depending on the system that you use.
Oh, the also thing that you're going to need too is the doctors not only can need to sign up for, the dates that they want to work. There has to be an easy way for the doctors to fill out a timesheet so that they can document how many hours they worked. And then you can show that to the hospital and say, hey, they worked this. This is their signature. You guys need to look at it, sign it, or acknowledge it and send it back to us so that we can book you. So that we can
invoice.
Bill. And what we would use QuickBooks. We made it simple, straightforward.
Yeah. At that time, we were using QuickBooks. Now we use timesheets.com.
No, well, to do our timesheets, we use...
Right. I'm talking about the timesheets.
Yeah.
Yeah. The timesheets. To do the timesheets, we use timesheets.com. But right, for the invoicing, we're still using...
QB?
Yeah, QuickBooks. There was one other thing. Oh, the other thing that I was going to say is, and I don't know if their questions are on this, but onboarding doctors is going to be extremely important.
Tell them, sis. Tell them.
Oh my goodness!
So what does that mean? Onboarding. What does that mean? What does that mean? Onboarding. No, you are not my sister. What does that mean? Onboarding.
So onboarding the doctors, right? So we talked a little bit about negotiating, having a contract with the doctors, with the hospital. And we mentioned very briefly having a contract, in agreement with the doctors. But you can't just be like, all right, sign this. We all agree. Like that is the least of it. Okay. Again, I got a story for y'all that I cannot tell you right now. But I will tell you, I promise, in the coming months, I will tell you this story. But onboarding doctors is going to be extremely important, just in the same way that your locums agencies, the big locum agencies, get people's credentials, their license, their diplomas from medical school, their diplomas from residency.
You just gotta make sure people are legit, y'all. Like,
yes,
just because someone is saying that they want to do locums with you, you as the locums agency have to be able to prove,
even if you know them,
you have to be able to prove without a doubt that they have all the credentials and they're all legit. What med school they went to, what residency they went to, what fellowship they went to. You need diplomas with the actual stamps on it. You need references, and you got to make sure these references are not like, Craig and them had said that I'm a good surgeon, right? You need all of these things. You need to know if they've had any medical malpractice cases. That doesn't preclude anything, but you just need to know that it's been closed and what the resolution is. You need to know all these, even if they're your friends, you need to know this, right? So that you can put this and document this, and you can give this to the hospital, and the hospital can be like, all right, cool, no problem. We'll credential these people, but you need to know everything.
Yes.
Nice.
Do not get fooled by, this person and that's my man, 100 grand. Like
I passed my boards. They're like, nah, son, right. I need to know the score.
Board certification. That's another one, right? And consistent, right? Because depending on how long you have this locum tenens agency, depending on how long you have a person working for you, remember, every couple of years, you're going to need that, you're going to need the, your license to be renewed. You're going to make sure that they have a DEA number. Like, all of this needs to be on file. You need to make sure that their maintenance and certification is where it needs to be. And you need to be on top of this all the time. You need to remind them, like, hey, listen, if you have any malpractice suits that came up, whether it was through a job that we presented to you or not, you need to let us know, and you need to have your due diligence. You need to do your due diligence and document that you are requesting this information and that you are taking the appropriate steps, to keep this physician either working or not working with your agency based on the information that you got. So if a physician is no longer board certified, for example, if they didn't do their maintenance and certification, but that hospital requires the doctor to be board certified, then they're no longer eligible for that assignment, even if they were on that assignment before. So you have to notify the hospital, and then the hospital can make the final determination, but you have to do your due diligence and be like, hey, Dr. So-and-so is no longer board certified. I just need to let you know that. Now, technically, the hospital is also supposed to be asking for this information as well. But because you are the one presenting them with this assignment, it's still your responsibility. So make sure you are accountable.
Let's shift to travel, right? That's a big concern. Yep. So they want to know, do we work with certain travel companies, right? So for example, lodging, hotels, airlines, travel agencies, or do you always cover travel costs for your doctors? That's a good question, right? So in our situation, all the doctors basically lived in the same town or lived nearby.
Well, most of the doctors, not all of them.
When we first started out, all the doctors did.
Yeah, when we first started.
Then when we expanded, it changed, but initially all the doctors were in the same area. So the only thing we really had to take care of literally was just them their time of taking care of patient care. That's it.
Yeah.
Then we recruited other doctors who were from, further away. And that's when we had to make sure, okay, how are we going to cover the costs? But because our lawyer was dope and our contract was dope, in our contract with the hospital, it always said that if we bring locums, if we bring doctors from, outside a certain area, a certain, range, the hospital had to pay for airline costs, had to pay reasonable airline costs, had to pay for the hotel. This is a reasonable hotel room, had to pay for a rental car, right? And what else did they have to pay for?
Just travel and lodging for the most part.
And that's standard, guys.
Depending.
That's standard. Yeah. That is very standard. So just want you guys to understand that is standard. So we had that in our contract. So when we expanded and brought some doctors who weren't in the area to fly them from one part of the United States to this place, we put up the money, right? And that's the other thing too you got to think about too is when you're doing this, you got to make sure that you have enough cash flow to put up the money initially, whether that's cash flow or credit. If you're using a credit card, you're going to have to arrange the hotel. You're going to have to arrange the rental car, the flights. Now, if you decide to use a travel agency or not, so that so that the doctor can make those arrangements, that's up to you. But you're going to be putting up as an agency the money first. Then you bill the hospital. Hospital pays you. You clear up those costs and then go from there. So just make sure you have enough cash revenue to be able to cover that. But yeah. It's a really good, it's an interesting opportunity with lodging and hotels and airlines. That's another set of work. And that's where you may need a VA.
Yeah, that you may need a VA depending on how many of those docs are going to be coming in and out of that particular region, that particular area, and how they're going to be getting there. Because if everybody is not within driving distance, then it becomes very cumbersome. So what are the other questions?
There's a lot of other questions, but I think the key thing is let's wrap it up by just the one question that I think is really interesting is what is a realistic time frame to have a locums company up and running? Right? They said they already have a few colleagues in mind for staffing. So in essence, it's kind of like us, right? The question that I have for you is how big do you want to be? Right. And what I mean by that is like, if you want to be small, you're going to move fast and you can niche. And there's a lot of things that you can do that a larger company can't do. If you want to be really big, then you're going to have to hire people. There's going to be obviously some economies of scale, but you're going to have to front some more money. I always say start small, make sure you have everything. What is up with my background, y'all?
Every time you say something amazing.
Why does it keep doing that?
Fireworks, baby.
Damn, I'm on fire, man. I'm on point. I got it. Okay. So basically, yeah, Zoom likes what I'm saying, yo. So yeah, I think a realistic time frame to have a locums company depends on how quickly can you create a contract between you and the hospital. So that means
And
you
then
have to
you and the
develop a
providers.
relationship. Yeah, you have to develop a relationship with a hospital. How quickly can you develop a relationship and a contract with them? Then how quickly can you develop a contract with your providers? And then
And
from there,
onboard them properly.
yeah. And then from there kind of go. So I think realistically, we're talking about, if you want to be really, it's going to take 6 to 12 months, I think.
6 to 12 months.
You think that's too long?
Yeah, especially if you have physicians already like interested. So with us,
Well, the reason I say that is they said that they already have colleagues in mind for staffing. They didn't say that they had a hospital in mind. So I'm just assuming that it's going to take a minute to go through the verbal negotiations.
Go through the different hospitals that might have a need.
We want to engage with you, and then the back and forth of, you know how it goes, the back and forth with the contracts of, we want to pay this.
What you're saying.
I'm accustomed to that, and I'm accustomed to this. And you're like, come on, son, let's sign this contract. Right?
Right. I see what you're saying. So you're saying on the side of the finding a hospital and then going through that with them. Yeah. Yes, that could take long. Our case was very different. We were up and running within days.
Yeah, we were. We had to be moving in days.
Like, I want to say 14 days, maybe.
Yo.
I have to look at those emails again. I don't delete anything. But it was days. We were up and running within days because the need was immediately after I left. And so it was like, hold on a second.
Y'all don't know, real quick, because we can't go much longer, but y'all don't know. But there came a point where we had already engaged in the hospital. And I think the hospital either had saw the first bill or had a question about, I think the calendar was completely full. And they wanted to meet with us about ways that we can be basically more economical. And you were 1 week postpartum. You remember that? And I was like, I'm gonna go in this meeting. I'm gonna handle it. You're like, no, you're not. I'm coming with you.
Yo. I went in there with my freaking, fundus, two finger breaths under my umbilicus. Okay.
You walked into that meeting. I was like, yo, I hope you got pads.
I was like,
I was like, yo,
y'all not about to do that. Nope. So
so remember, guys, sometimes even you go through that process and the hospital may not be prepared for the payments. And it's
yes.
But anyway, the point of the matter is we got up and running really quick and we figured it out. We made a lot of mistakes, but we figured it out and we fucked around that first year and when charged about over 7 figures for all the work that they did. And I think when you see those numbers, you start to realize the amount, how much us as physicians or what their worth is and what they provide. The hospital still made their money back in billing and all those things. Yo, I'm telling y'all right now, it was crazy. But then I think the other thing that it taught me really was the hospital just really wants warm bodies.
Butts in the seat.
They just want you to fill the schedule, widgets, which are the equivalent of doctors. And we know that that's different, but that's how they like it. And I was like, wow. But we did it, and obviously we didn't retain that amount, but it was just amazing number to see damn, in a year, this is how much they're paying, but they had the coverage.
And we continued for 3.5, we did it for 3.5 years.
Yeah. And I think at that point, when we started getting towards the end, we were like, well, should we expand? And I think from a lifestyle standpoint for us, it was just I don't know if I want to keep doing this.
By then we had our second son. Yeah. We were moving. And we decided actually, do we want to spend more of our time doing, for me anyway, the question was, did I want to spend more of my time doing something that we could pass on to our sons? Which, I guess you could pass on a locum tenens agency, but
You can pass on any
Or-
business to your children.
Of course
you
you
can pass
can.
on any
Of
business to
course.
them. Yeah. You
Or
know.
did we want to do real estate? And we,
I think
for
our
me
passion
anyway.
changed. The passion
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
And the
And
work.
I don't know that doing the locum tenens agency was so much a passion more than it just kind of fell in our laps, and it was like, man,
it was a
this
passion for me.
actually is fun.
It was a passion for me.
It was
a passion for me. Yeah, because I was just like
passionate about it.
Well, yeah, because I remember like telling
like
doctors,
you pre-med. I'm so passionate about becoming a physician. The passion that I have about being a doctor and the passion that I have for helping those who are underserved. And
you making fun of your own clients, yo. Don't do that.
Please, whatever, because we
That's
all
hate.
said it. I said it. You
That's
said
hate.
it. Everybody listening to this podcast done said it. So if
That's
anybody
hate.
want to come after me and talk about, you shouldn't be talking about pre-med
That's
that
hate.
way, then what I say to you is, you shouldn't have been pre-med.
That's hate, Renee. That's hate. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's hate. That's hate, yo. Yo, but for me, there was a point where I was just really enjoying like teaching these docs. Because remember, we would do things like we would do some webinars or some resources and teach them how to retain more or keep more, like basically like tax strategies and stuff. And we would give them books, remember? We would give them books. We would teach them how to like make sure that they're, properly utilizing this 1099 money well so that it benefits them. And then also at the same time, we were teaching them how to advocate for themselves against the hospital in a positive way, right? It was a positive relationship. Those things I really enjoyed. Then after a while, there was some headaches that we had to deal with that kind of kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you throw on top of that, our lifestyle was changing. And it was just like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Y'all driving me nuts. And then it was like, well, should we try to find another place? And I was like, I don't know if I want to deal with this.
Yeah.
We out. Let's do something different.
Yeah.
And that was it, guys. That's exactly how we fell into starting our own locums agency. And it was the best 3.5 years that we've ever done. It was dope. We were on our stuff. They had to be impressed by what 2 doctors could do. And, that was one of the proudest moments to go ahead and do that. Like you said, you're right. I didn't even think about that. I forgot that we did that in how many days?
We did it over like days. I have to look up the emails, but we solidified that contract. We got all of the physicians credentialed. Because remember, everybody just kind of thought, oh, it's just going to be 1, 2, 3. It was like, and I was like, if you know anything about me, me and contracts, we like this.
Yeah.
I don't do anything without a contract.
Yeah.
We like this. And
anyway.
we have to do things by the book. It has to be documented because you just want to make sure that everybody understands the expectations, right? It's not because you're trying to jilt somebody or you trying to, you think somebody's going to try to get over. It's just that if you don't understand the expectations, if someone has a different interpretation of the expectations that you have, then it's going to be a problem. That's why I watch so much Judge Judy.
You sound like a fool.
That's your opinion.
My opinion's the only one that counts.
On rerun.
That's about it, y'all. We're going to wrap this up, y'all, because this ain't going to last as long. And I'm tired. I got locums the next morning. So listen, guys, make sure you check out our previous episodes on locums and
check
to the 2 doctors. To the 2 doctors, hold on a second. To the 2 doctors that send us these questions, these are some great questions, and you gave us great ideas and great content over these last several weeks. So thank you very much. If there's anybody else who has any questions on locums or has any questions on anything that you hear us talk about a lot, whether it's real estate, investing, paying off student loans, lifestyle, kids, all those different things, send us a question. We might be able to make a really good series out of this. And this was dope. So Dr. Renee is going to be back to normal for us, normal podcasting schedule.
Normal podcasting. So now I have to deal with your just randomness. Okay, great.
You love it. What's the PDF you want to tell them about?
So don't forget, we're going to detail a little bit of what we talked about today, just kind of bullet points. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that if you guys are interested in learning more about locums, we have a little bit of a group that we're going to be taking on to teach you and take you through the locum tenens process, whether that's you want to just start out doing locum tenens or you want to go all the way to starting your own locum tenens agency. But we're going to be taking a small group through that process. So if you want to be part of that group, when you click on that link below, it'll also take you not just to what we're offering in terms of the download, but it's also going to take you to the I guess the interest group, the wait list or whatever. It's going to be a small group, so I don't know if everybody will get into it. But if you are interested, go ahead and give us your information, and we will contact you to let you know if you got into the group.
Yeah, that orthopedic surgeon, you better sign up for this course. You over here saying what we doing on our podcast. Sign up for this course. All right, y'all. We out. We're going to talk to y'all later, y'all. Peace.
Freakly, Shanika, Janae, Rhonda, Freakly, hey. How you like it, daddy? Freakly, how you like it, daddy?